All right, I think we are live. Hey everyone, welcome to the session. Thanks for coming in. Happy Sunday. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone's safe and healthy, and that you all had a good week. So we'll just get started, and I'll say that I'm super honored, as always, to be with you in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty. And I look forward to sharing time with you in our shared sacred space today. And so today, the things we're going to do, let me just check my Facebook Live and make sure it's working. Okay. So today, what I want to do in our session is, as we do every week, we'll set sacred space together. And the topic for this week will be kind of an introduction to the Muse. I think the title is The Power of the Muse in Healing and Bliss. So I'll make some hopefully brief comments on the Muse. It's a big topic and kind of an interesting little twist today. And then after that, we will try to kind of expand on, almost like the feeling of the Muse with a story, and Gowrie will lead us in that. So she'll tell a story just like we did a couple sessions ago. I'll come and give my little reading, and we'll go back and forth a little bit. We may talk a little bit about just what a potential exercise to do on your own over the next week could be, and then we'll close sacred space. Okay. So with that, let me let's get started. Okay. And again, if anyone has any issues with audio-visual, first thing to try is to refresh your browser. And then the second thing, if that still doesn't work, there's a link that I put in the chat to the Facebook Live. And you can go there. If you make comments on Facebook Live, I won't see them in real time. Gowrie may be able to check for me. But I will go there after the session and check and answer any questions as well. And if you post questions there, we'll collect them for future sessions where we do Q&A. All right. So I'll go ahead and set sacred space now. This is a space devoid of fear, threat, and control for us to open to higher guidance. From within our own selves, however we tend to take higher guidance. Our hope here is to create a safe sanctuary space for us all to relax and surrender with no danger or threat, so that we can partake of the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. In an opening sacred space today, I will propose that we all follow the 4 principles of proceeding in sacred space. The first being confidentiality. What is said in sacred space stays in sacred space. Now here on the internet, where video can be taken and released and all that, the way we do confidentiality is through anonymization. So in Crowdcast, you would go in, you would edit your profile, change your username to Mickey Mouse or Harry Potter, and then ask your question and participate in the chat. You don't have to do that, but you can. So that's the first principle, confidentiality. The second is no threat, no controlling, no fixing, no intervening, no tough love. Nothing where we're trying to fix or cure or improve within ourselves or even the other person. And the idea here is that in sacred space, the goal is to hold space for each other, to be afraid, to be stupid, to be incompetent, to be anxious, to be happy when you feel like maybe it's not appropriate for me to be happy, to relax, and just to be okay with however we are each other mutually, and to hold space for that. We're not saying that fixing and healing and making recommendations and trying to improve each other is a bad thing. But that is the realm very specifically of the profane, not that the profane is bad, a realm of control, threat, read this book, it'll help you. And the implication is if you don't read it, you're a dunderhead, right? And you're going to continue suffering. So there's nothing wrong with that, but that is in the province of the profane. And we're in the profane 90% of the time anyway in modern world. So after this hour or so, we'll go out and we can do all those things out there anyway. This hour is a special hour, reserved for the sacred. So we put those things aside so that we can drink and gorge and refresh ourselves with the springs, the well springs of the sacred. Third principle, just a corollary, no commerce. Nothing may be sold by anyone, by me, or recommended, or even suggested, right? If it's like a free resource and, oh, you should try this like healer, you should read this book, we don't do that here, right? Afterwards, in the profane, we can do that left and right. But here, we are here for your energy, not for the things you bring. In other words, for what you are, not for what you do or provide. For you as an end in yourself, not for the function or value or the quote-unquote value you provide. And then the fourth principle is that there's no expectation of participation, right? There's no pressure to do anything. You don't need to chat. You don't need to say hello. You don't need to introduce yourself. You don't need to ask a question. If you need to leave early, leave. Come and go as you please. People will often say in the chat, oh, sorry, I need to leave early. That's great. I appreciate that, but you don't have to do that. This is a space for you where the rest of us, there are enough of us here, certainly, holding the space so that any one of us can just come and go as we please. And that's part of the nourishment, to know that, you know, we got your back. If you need to go, if you need to check your texts, make a phone call, all that's fine. The nourishment comes from the held space and your presence and attention from what you are, not from what you do or provide. And together, all of us will amplify that. So this is what I'm proposing. And if you're okay with that, hang tight. And if you're not okay with that, we will now pause and give you a moment to withdraw from the group. And we'll just catch up with you later in the profane. That's cool. In other words, there's no fear, threat, or control for you to remain in sacred space with us either. It's all good. Okay, no worries at all. So I'll give you a moment to just dial that in and withdraw as you prefer. Okay. All right, for now, for the rest of us, we will now move together into space. And now I'll just remind that we are under the principles of proceeding sacred space confidentiality, no fear, threat, or control, no commerce, no recommendations, and no expectation of participation. Okay. I love this part. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for being here with me. Happy Sunday. Okay, so the topic I wanted to touch on today, I thought it was going to be easy, is I want to talk about the Muse. The Muse. So 2 sessions ago, we talked about the power of the feminine, the inner feminine, as contrasted with the inner masculine. So we did a whole session on that, which was lovely to do with you all. And I think in the next session, we will also talk about the power of the masculine, the inner masculine. But before we do that, for today's session, I wanted to take a pause and go a little bit deeper into the inner feminine and talk about a special case of the power of the feminine, and that is the power of the Muse. And the question, of course, is, what or who is the Muse? Now, just very simply, at the most rudimentary level, the Muse can be thought of as an archetype from Greek mythology, a class of deity that inspires creativity and the arts. In Greek antiquity, there were 9 muses, each covering a different sort of sphere of artistic endeavor: tragedy, comedy, writing, poetry, lyrical, different kinds of poetry, and who were explicitly invoked and prayed to, summoned, supplicated to, when embarking on an artistic or creative endeavor. At the beginning of a book, you would invoke a certain muse. At the beginning of a performance at a feast, the bard, the singer, would invoke the Muse. For our purposes, you can think of the quote-unquote muse as perhaps a very strong source of intuition within you, if you like, a kind of intuitive knowing, a source of guidance, a source of wisdom, and even in some cases, a source of protection on your life path. As a bringer of intuitive vision, she is, of course, to me, feminine, or tends to be feminine. And also she tends to dwell in the precincts of the sacred, not the profane. Honestly, though, when I talk about the muse, I use words like tend to. I try not to use words that are definitive. Because honestly, it is hard to talk about her because her very nature, in many ways, defies reductivism and the constraints and control of reason and logic. Right? If anything, she is the agent of the mythos, right, that we've spoken about in the past. She is the agent of the mythos in direct counterbalance to the logos. Said another way, she is the agent of the sacred, right, in direct counterbalance to the profane. And so, for me, right, to get on screen with you and start to draw diagrams and make classifications as to like dissect the muse and how she works and how to make her work in your benefit would be just absolutely highly inappropriate. And I will not do that here or really anywhere. And almost to illustrate the point, when I was struggling all day yesterday, Saturday, with how to approach this talk today. And I was surprised that I struggled all day with it, right? I was actually reminded of the quote by the poet W.H. Auden, where he says that we are lived by powers we pretend to understand. Where we are lived by powers in our life we pretend to understand. And in my life experience, this is really nowhere more true than in the case of the muse. So then, I mean, what can we say about her? Those of you who follow my work and do the weekly, live group advising sessions on Fridays, especially know that I can talk about the muse all day long, right? It's getting me to shut up. That's the trick, right? I can tell muse stories endlessly from my own personal experience, muse stories of my own life, my own run-ins with the muse in my life, stories of my advisees and their run-ins with the muse over the years, and bliss and healing and dream work. And so, I talk about the muse all the time. So I thought yesterday, I'll wait till Saturday to put my talk together. And I thought it would be easy just to, throw a few notes together and for maybe like a 20-minute talk and then get to our story that Gary will take us through. But honestly, even yesterday, preparing this talk on the muse, I ended up struggling the entire day yesterday with this simple little talk, right? I mean, now, to be fair, at any point, I could have just brute forced it and made some notes in just, 10 or 20 minutes, talking points, and I would have been done with my prep for this session that I'm giving you right now, right? I've got tons of material on the muse. I could talk endlessly just about her lineage in the Greek pantheon, let alone the Hindu pantheon, right? But something yesterday just did not feel right. I was getting a download guidance from the muse herself while I was preparing my talk about her. And because I like to think of myself, as a good boy when it comes to the muse, I like to think of myself as a good boy. Something did not feel right. Something was off with the topic. Something was off with me. And so, because this is kind of my job anyway, this is what I do, right? I noticed that, and I just kind of went into the sacred as best I could. And I tried to just sit there like a dumb animal, right? And just hold space for the offness that I was feeling and for the discomfort I was feeling. And not because I thought it would lead to a better result. I was like, I can write a talk anytime. Something's going on here. I'm just going to stop, full stop, engines off, sails down, and just drift like a total idiot, right, is what it feels like. And that's okay. And by the end of the day of really getting absolutely nothing productive done, I realized that this state itself that I had been in all day was a muse-driven day, right? That there was probably something new she wanted me to say about her workings, not any of the things I've already said in the past. And my suffering for the day, I mean, suffering is a strong word, but my discomfort, my agony for the day of like, what the hell is going on, was aimed at, working me over, right? Pounding me, pummeling me a little bit to soften me up so that I would relax and I would actually see the things she was putting in front of me. And that's why I'm telling you about it now, right? As a mini example of how the muse works. I mean, the day of suffering yesterday was like this fresh example of, the workings of the muse. Not predictable by me, not controllable by me, not negotiable by me, right? But, my only job was to notice something was going on. And hopefully I have, which I have, I've arranged my life to have this kind of flexibility in it. I could just stop everything and say, all right, here are the keys to the bus, you drive. What are we doing? And she's basically like, don't ask questions, just sit tight. And I was like, okay, it's not the first time I've heard that. And okay. Or basically, to me, to use the story of yesterday in preparing this very talk for you, the point in many ways is that the act of flowing with the muse, the nature of this act of willingly trying to flow with the muse, is not to be right or good or productive or effective. Right? I could have prepared a dozen talks in the time I spent. That would have been perfectly right and good and productive and effective. You all would have sort of liked it or politely pretended you liked it. And it would have been fine. Right? But rather, the point of flowing with the muse is to surrender to the sacred, regardless of how you may think you know better. And this is over the course of a day, but this can also be pulled to being over the course of a week or years, or even the course of an entire well-lived life. And so for yesterday, if I felt her guidance to waste a perfectly good day on wrestling with this topic for no good reason, then that is what I would surrender to. And so I did, regardless, right, of whether I thought I would get a better talk out of it or not. I didn't know that at the beginning. I don't know that now, frankly. In other words, the surrender to the muse is not conditioned on me getting a better outcome or winning the Nobel Prize for Literature or, making more money or having a better work product or even feeling better about my work. I feel better about the work at the end of the day. There is no condition. Properly done, the surrender to the muse is unconditional. Said another way, the point of my prepping for a live sacred space session like this is not actually to do the session. I mean, we're here live, it's all great, but this event now is not even the point. I mean, I do love it. I love being with you, right? And maybe, it is impactful. Maybe 10 or 20,000 people end up seeing it after it gets distributed on Facebook and blah, 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 right? But it's as if all of this is just an excuse, a conceit, if you will, for the muse to be able to grab me and work me over, right? To pummel me, to soften me up in order to push something through me that she is trying to get through. And, you can make all kinds of nitpicky comments on well, does she have to do it that way? For me, it's like, if that's how she's got to do it, then that's how she's got to do it. And that's all right. Right? I'm lucky to even be here. And those of you who are, artists, musicians, creatives, writers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know the seemingly pointless torture I'm describing. And I guess my point here, in the sacred, on a Sunday morning, talking about the Muse herself as gently and, trying not to piss her off as possible. The point here is that I'm describing this pointless torture, this unconditional surrender. I'm describing it, pointing to it, and I am validating it. Right? I am validating it as like the real deal, the way you do it. You're not stupid, you're not crazy, neither is she, and this is just how it works. And I guess part of the point is that if that state of flowing with the Muse, where you fully surrender and you feel like a dumb animal, is not to be validated and celebrated in a sacred space like this, then I don't know where else on the planet or in life we would ever do it. So here we are, right? So here we are. Gowrie said we're talking about the Muse today, right? So we are. And instead of having diagrams and dissecting it, I was like, well, I can't do it like that. I don't know how I'm going to do it. This is I suppose is how we're supposed to be doing it. And so I guess the larger point I want to make here is that in my experience, in my personal life experience and in my professional experience, right, serving as an advisor to a couple tens of thousands of advisees over the past several years, the phenomenon or pattern to the Muse that I have observed, the tendency, not the definitive, right, but just the tendency, and healing work and bliss work and dream work, is that she seems to be the agent of pushing forward, advocating, but also actively pushing forward, like keeping her thumb on the scales of life unfairly in the direction of pushing forward. A pattern of unfolding in one's life, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not. The sense that there is an overall pattern to a person's life. Well, we can call it many names, and we have bliss, ziran, your like natural flow when we talk about it in the bliss program. Flow itself, following the river of your life, destiny, the meaning and purpose of your life, the acorn of your life, bursting into an oak tree over the course of a well-lived life, and then back again to acorns, right? That there is an overall pattern to a person's life that is typically most easily discernible in hindsight when you're writing your memoirs. But you do, as you go forward, you do get glimpses along the way. And so the feeling is that the Muse is the life force. When we talk about life forces in the money session we did in May, the life force of money, the life force of sex, the life force of charm, intelligence, of brute force. The Muse itself is like a life force in charge of guiding you along this overall governing pattern, and to make sure, to the best of your ability and hers, to make sure that it gets done, whatever that even means. Whatever that even means. And that this pattern will not only include the nice things, right, the blissful, inspiring things, the love and light, the rainbows and unicorns things, but that it will also include the woundings and the traumas and the hurts and the setbacks, and that all these are somehow, and it's very hard to say this and admit this, especially to a person in the moment. So I'm chicken shit. I just don't go there, right? But at this overall level, when I am talking about the Muse and the sacred, I have to speak this truth. But that all of these dark things, these painful things, are also somehow part of the larger pattern as well. And it's hard to say this, for me to say this personally, because especially in my line of work as a healer and the things that I've seen people go through, some of these things are not things you would ever want in your life pattern, bliss or no bliss, Muse or no Muse. I mean, some of these things are not things you would wish on your own worst enemy. And yet, there they are. And in hindsight especially, they are there in a discernible pattern. And the pattern, as long as you are alive, and even then, who knows, the pattern keeps unfolding almost irresistibly. And even now, in the session, the pattern is unfolding in you and in me. Now, to use some terminology for my advisees. And to connect with something we were talking about just in live group on Friday. The Muse is the forward agent of archetypal manifestation, this term we used on Friday. The Muse is the life force that is in charge of the fulfillment of your overall archetypal pattern and the navigation in your life path from one archetype to the next. Just a quick aside. So I guess what I'm saying overall is that when people hear talk about the Muse, they think, oh, how wonderful. I wish I had a Muse too. Oh, just look at that Artie Wu. He's so inspiring, living his bliss and all that loveliness. And I mean, don't get me wrong. It's great. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I guess what I'm saying is that there is a dark side to the Muse as well. There is a scary, ruthless side to the Muse as well, who doesn't really give a flying anything about what you're afraid of and what you want and what you don't want. She's here to prosecute the pattern, and you're almost like a canvas, right? You're the lump of clay that she got assigned to, and she's like, really, this? And she's like, all right, well, let's get on with it. And it's all for the best in the end, I suppose. But it is absolutely scary as hell when you are in the thick of it. Because the feeling is that the pattern is the pattern, right? It will be fulfilled. And if you are stuck or scared or suppressing it or hanging on for dear life, resisting it, then the Muse will tend to appear dark and with force work you over, right? Subject you to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? Until you are pummeled into submission. And I choose my words carefully when I say this. When you are pummeled into surrender. When you are pummeled back into the sacred. A full surrender back into the actual flow of your life. Right? Not the direction that you cling to out of fear or threat or prestige or whatever, but the direction you actually start drifting in again when you finally let go and surrender. To put it another way, and to use very simple words, the Muse is terrifying. The Muse is terrifying. Which, not to pull the threat and fear card in the sacred space, which to me personally is, just one more good reason for us to want to get to know her better, right? She has the power to get you via her like inspiration and meaning and purpose in life. And hooray, and this is my bliss, and this is where I want to go. This is what makes me happy. This is what gives my life meaning. That's great. But she also has the power to seriously pummel you into surrender if you are actually resisting the larger pattern of your life. Okay. So then, all of this then begs the question of, well, okay, then, if she's so powerful, when does she reward, right? When does she punish? How do we stay on our good side? Artie, can you give us some how-tos, some do's and don'ts, pro tips on how to stay on our good side? And I would say, no, I can't answer those questions. Because these questions, how does she reward? How does she punish? How do we stay on our good side? These are all the questions of the profane. Because by asking these questions and finding the answers, we seek to control the outcome of our run-ins with the Muse. The only way in the sacred is to surrender to her. Whether you feel her or not, whether you ever feel like you've heard her or not, is to surrender just on general principle, unconditional surrender. And then, maybe, she will come to you. And then she will tell you what you need to do. In dream, in intuition, in internal musings, literally musings, that's why we call on that. And then also, if need be, in the external force of imposed life circumstance. Now, if you do try and are able to discern a little bit of the pattern, and you are given glimpses of it if you are willing to look through being in the sacred and a thing like this, through learning to see more and more with a mythopoetic lens, that's all the better. That's all the better, right? And you can if you want, but you don't have to. And the reason you don't have to is because she, the muse, does not necessarily need you to see the larger pattern. Her cattle prod, right, works just fine to get you to move in the direction she needs you to move, whether you see the pattern or not. We're at the 30-minute mark. I think that is about all I wanted to say today about the muse. I will just tell you, the first inkling I had was probably 2 years ago, in early 2018, where an idea formed in my mind of like, oh, should I do a program on the muse? Should I do a whole kind of thing of like recovering the muse, getting in touch with the muse? And she just stepped in and she was like, no. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to like offend. So no, not ever. And she was like, you don't even get to know that. No. And I'll tell you when. I was like, okay. I'm just here. So today, in talking about the muse, even for half an hour, is kind of something I'm entering into very gingerly, very delicately. There's much more I can say, obviously, but I think that's about the right amount for today. And the point again here is to kind of give you a visceral feeling then for the cattle prod of the muse, and the circumambulatory feeling, right, of a life path when you surrender to the muse. What does that even feel like? What does that even feel like? It's like up, it's down. I kind of see the pattern, but then I come to the end of that pattern. First of all, it didn't turn out the way I thought it would. And then now I'm on to like this next adventure after that I could not have foreseen. If you'd offered me like, all the gold in the world, I could have never guessed it would have turned out like this. So that's the overall feeling. And so that's it. I'll stop the talk part of the session. And in the next session, in the next part, I'll invite Gary on screen to tell us a story. And we will dig into this feeling of the viscerality of the cattle prod of the muse a little bit and try to do it through the story as well. So Gary, you can come on screen anytime you want. And the last thing I'll say here before I hand you over to her is that when we were brainstorming how we would do this talk this past week, I was basically like, Gary, what story do you think we should do? And she thought about it, and she came up with the story. Hi,
Hi, everyone.
She came up with this story idea, and my first reaction was like, really? How does that even explain anything about the muse? And she was like, I don't know. That's just what came to me. This is like how our work meetings go. Really? Why? I don't know. I have no idea. Oh, okay. So I was like, oh, okay. And I thought literally we're on text, and I just stopped and I thought about it. And I got this flood of like download on like the pre-story, the backstory of everything that she'll share what it is. And I finally texted back. I was like, actually, I think I have a lot to say about this. And she just started laughing. I was like, okay, I don't know where this is going to lead. But let's just, that's the thing she was given. Let's just take it, run with it, and see where it goes. So, Gary, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Artie. Okay. So we've got a story from the Greek tradition this time. And this is a story of the Greek hero, Theseus. And there's quite a lot of adventure and heroic stories, with Theseus in the Greek tradition. And the story that came to me and I want to talk about is particularly how Theseus saves the city of Athens from a calamity. So to give a bit of a background, Theseus is the son of King Aegeus of Athens. But he doesn't grow up there. He doesn't grow up in the city of Athens. He grows up in Troezen, which is his mother's city. And when he grows up to be a young man, he goes to Athens, and his father welcomes him and makes him the successor to the throne, right? So he becomes the crown prince. But right at the point when he goes to Athens and all of this happens, the city is in a kind of a nervous, grief, because they're preparing for an event that comes every 9 years. And the event is this, that every 9 years, Athens is bound to send 7 young men and 7 young women to the island of Crete. And they're not sending them there as slaves or, to work there or anything. They're sending those young men and women to Crete to be fed to a monster. So that's what happens. They're bound to this. They have to do this. They dare not defy the king of Crete, King Minos. And he's ordered this, and they're too scared to defy him. And Theseus becomes aware of this, and he doesn't know this tradition, and he asks his father, what is this about? And his father explains to him. And how they do this, how they pick the people who are supposed to go to Minos is they draw lots, and the names that come up, they are fated to go on a voyage to Crete and then submit themselves. So when the lots are being drawn, Theseus stands up and says, I offer myself. I want to go as one of the sacrificial victims. And Aegeus, his father, is shocked. And everybody else in the room is like so overwhelmed with the nobility of what he did. And they're so grateful to him for voluntarily offering himself. But when they're alone, the father and son, Theseus tells his father, I know that you're upset that I offered myself, but I'm not just going there to be a sacrificial victim. I intend to kill the monster. I'm going there to kill the monster. And Aegeus is even more shocked because he's never heard anything like that before. And he says, how do you intend to do that? What do you want to do? And Theseus says, well, I don't know really. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have a plan. But I know that I will be assisted by the gods. And I know that I must do this. And Aegeus is still not convinced. He's upset. He's afraid. And Theseus tries to persuade him, and he finally convinces him. And he says, worry not. I will go there. I will get this done, and I'll come back. And watch out for my ship. And what I'll do is, when I'm successful and when I set sail from Crete, I will change the sails of the ship from black to white. When leaving Athens, the sails will be black because, they're going in grief. But while returning, I will change it to white so you know that I'm coming back home victorious, right? So, and everything will be fine, don't worry. So this happens, and Theseus, with 6 other men and 7 women, sets forth to the island of Crete on the ship, and they reach Crete. And when they get there, the custom is that the victims have to be paraded in front of King Minos. And after that, be sent to this monster. And a little bit about the monster, right? Now, King Minos has a great big palace, and inside the palace, he has this huge labyrinth built. There's a maze that he has commissioned his genius architect Daedalus to build so that he can contain the monster within that labyrinth. In the center of the labyrinth is this monster, half man, half bull, called Minotaur. So Minotaur resides there. And the genius of the labyrinth is that Daedalus has built it such a way that once you enter it, there is no escaping. You can't get out of it without outside assistance. You can just not do it yourself. So that's how the Minotaur is contained in there. He cannot leave the labyrinth. And every now and then he has to be fed. So King Minos has devised this thing where he extracts, people from other places, other cities, and he sends them, those victims, into the labyrinth to be fed to the Minotaur. And this goes on. So before these men and women enter the labyrinth, King Minos himself wants to supervise and see if, Athens has kept its promise and sent the men and women as promised. And there's people all around, and these victims are brought in front of him. And Theseus, leading them, walks in first. And Minos looks at them, and he knows these are the people going in. But at the same time, while this is happening, Minos' daughter, Ariadne, she's in the hall too. And the moment she looks at Theseus, the moment her eyes fall on him, she falls in love with him. And she decides that she's going to help him so that he won't die in there. So before Theseus and his companions are led to the labyrinth, Ariadne sneaks out, goes out to him, approaches him, and says, I would like to help you. I know how to get you out of the labyrinth, and I'll help you get out of there alive. But you must promise me one thing. You must promise me that once you come out of the labyrinth, you'll take me back with you. Right? And Theseus is more than happy. So he agrees, and Ariadne gives him this ball of golden thread. Two things that he needs to get out of the labyrinth alive. One is this ball of golden thread, and the second is a sword. She hands these two things over to him. She says, you know what to do. I'll be waiting here for you at the gate. So the door opens and Theseus enters first. His companions are waiting. He goes in first. And the labyrinth is built in a way where going in is not a challenging task. It's quite easy to go in. All you have to do is just keep going forward, keep going down. And at some point, you'll end up at the center. So that's how it's built. But by some means, if you escape the Minotaur, coming back is tricky because you get lost in the maze. So that's the nature of the pattern. So the really, once you enter a labyrinth, if you happen to be in the labyrinth, the choice you have, two choices. Either you keep moving forward, right, until you reach the center, but then the monster is in the center, so it's a scary prospect. You either do that or you just stand still. You can't go back, but that's not an option. So you just stand still and not move. But then that's not a great choice as well, because at any moment, the Minotaur may just emerge and pounce on you and take you, right? So terrible, terrible choices, but you have two choices. And now, because Theseus is equipped with these two things, he actually starts moving forward without fear. With the golden ball in hand, he starts unraveling it as he walks in, and he keeps going down and going forward. and the thread just keeps on unraveling as he moves. So what he's doing is he's leaving a trail of that thread. And finally, when he reaches the center, the actual climax of the story is pretty concise. When he gets right down to the center, all he does is he pulls out the sword, fights with the Minotaur, and plunges the sword right into the beast. And the monster falls down. Right? And the Minotaur is dead. And that's it. Now the only thing left for him is to find his way back. And at that moment, after he kills Minotaur, the ball of golden thread, what's left of it, just falls down on the ground. And all he does is finds the trail, follows it back, and he gets all the way back to the door. He opens the door, there's jubilation, there's celebration, everybody's so happy to see him back. And Ariadne is waiting for him, but they don't have much time to stay there at Crete. They run back to the ship. Theseus, as promised, takes Ariadne back with him. They get onto the ship, they start sailing. So now, there's this excitement and, victory and all of it. But soon they realize that they have to stop for supplies. They haven't really stocked up for themselves. And they stop at this island called Naxos. So they get off when the ship and the crew are doing their thing. Theseus, tired from his adventure, goes off to sleep. Ariadne goes off to sleep next to him. And they're lying asleep. And this is a crucial moment when, while Theseus is asleep, Athena is the protectress, the goddess of the city of Athens itself. The city is named after her, right? So Athena comes to him in his dreams. And she tells him, you cannot take Ariadne to Athena, right? To the city of Athens. You can't take her back. You will have to leave her here. So wake up, get back to the ship and leave. This island, this Naxos, belongs to Dionysus, and Ariadne must belong to Dionysus. So you must leave her here. So, that comes as a shock, but what is he to do? So Theseus wakes up, gets back to the ship, and sails forth. So amidst all of this adventure, right, so many things, and like Theseus said at the beginning of the story, he has made no plans. None of this is planned, none of this is thought out and, laid out carefully. This is all on the spur of the moment. So as he sails back, he's completely forgotten his promise to his father that he will change the sails back to white. So he just keeps sailing, and far away on the coast of Athens, his father, King Aegeus, is standing on a rocky cliff, watching out, looking out to see if the ship is coming back. And he spots the ship, and there it is, it's sailing back, but the sails are black. They've not changed to white. And Aegeus makes the conclusion that his son has failed in his mission and he died at the hands of the Minotaur. So that's it. He is overwhelmed with grief. He's crushed with the loss of his son, and he just jumps off the cliff and takes his life. And at this point where he dies, the sea where he jumps in, to this day, the sea is called the Aegean Sea, named after him, King Aegeus, right? So Theseus comes back and he realizes what has happened. There's a whole mixture of, loss and grief, and at the same time, relief and celebration. The people are overjoyed to have their family back, and knowing that they will never have to do this again. Athens will never have to sacrifice any of its citizens to the monster. So there is that jubilation, but at the same time, the died. So there's a mixture of that. But then eventually Theseus the crown and he becomes the king of Athens. So for now, for the purpose of today's session, that's where the story ends. Theseus then goes on to have more adventures and all of that, but that's where we end today's story, as to how the Minotaur is slayed at the hands of Theseus. So yeah, so if Artie, would you like to come back and share your thoughts and what the symbols and what the narrative tells us about the Muse?
Yay! Thank you for telling that story. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Artie.
This is good. I'm really liking this, like hitting the ball back and forth here with you. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone would agree. It's lovely to hear you tell the story in full and like a proper, sort of pace and cadence. If it were me, I'd be like, the story of the labyrinth. Yeah. So anyway, let me do the analysis.
Oh, that's not true.
Here you actually get to hear the story, so it's lovely. So should I make a few?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm just taking. I'm always like, I turn off the mic when you're telling the story, and I start taking notes. So I guess the question originally was, how does a story like this kind of tell us something or illustrate something about the nature of flowing with the Muse and being with the Muse? And I guess there are so many things that just kind of jumped out at me. And in the end, when you said that thing about that's where the name of the Aegean Sea came from, like it was very moving to me. I don't even know why, because it was just last October, about 9 months ago, that I visited Greece and Athens for the first time. And I swam in the Aegean Sea for the first time, and it was a very moving kind of experience for me. And so, okay, so check me on this. Make sure I get back to the question of the Muse at the end of it. But what I want to do is, I'll just make some comments about this story, as I would do for any myth. And those of you who do dream work with me, this is what I do all the time in dream work, but I'll read this mythopoetically as if it's a dream. And the main thing to sort of note when you're reading something like this as a dream mythopoetically is to take every major actor and object or agent in the dream, in the myth, as a symbol of a different part of your own inner self. As a different part. Now, those of you who listen to the Frog King myth that I put the links up for a couple sessions, you've heard all this, right? So, but basically, if you read this then, Theseus is a part of you, Ariadne is a part of you, the Minotaur is a part of you, Minos, his wife, the queen Pasiphae, is a part of you, Athena is a part of you, the golden ball, and the golden thread, right? That's when we've talked about the golden thread in past sessions. That is the golden thread, where it comes from in Greek mythology, is a part of you. And then even Dionysus, right? And coming back, and King Aegis is a part of you. And so that's the first thing. This is like, you can take this then, you can read a myth or any dream on multiple levels. And the level at which we will typically read them at Preside is at this mythopoetic level, where we use it as a kind of diorama, as a kind of video, moving MRI or X-ray of things going on inside your own inner self. Okay. And so, couple things. There is a long flow to the circumambulation of our life. And the beautiful thing about this is that the myth, the section of the Greek myth that Gary has chosen centers on the labyrinth itself, which is the sort of signal marker, right? The central sort of symbol of circumambulation. So when I teach circumambulation and I talk about where this idea of circumambulation comes from, I talk about the labyrinth. I talk about the labyrinth. And the labyrinth is not a maze. You can't get lost. There's only one track in and out. And I've talked, there's a whole LSS live sacred space session where I talked about circumambulation in the labyrinth, and I refer you to that in the replays. But basically the idea here is that you are circumambulating, walking around, right? Circum, around, ambulate, walk. You're circumambulating around a center core that is often dark and scary. And in this case, the center core, what is in the center core? It is the Minotaur. What is the Minotaur? It is, for those of you who've done healing stuff with me, it is the lost board member. It is the exiled part of you. It is also the most sensitive and vulnerable part of you. Why is that? We'll get to that in a minute. But it is the thing that everyone fears. And yet, as you move around on your heroic, because Theseus is a hero, so on your heroic quest of like love and light, and I want to do everything right, and I want to spiritually ascend, you are irresistibly moving deeper and closer, even if you don't know it, because you're doing all these hairpin turns, to your meeting with the Minotaur. To your meeting with the Minotaur. And for today, I'll just center on of the Minotaur. I want to get you out of here in a reasonable amount of time. The idea of the Minotaur, to me, it is the he is a symbol of your deepest inner, your deepest shame, the thing that has cost you the most. It's clearly cost King Minos the most. It's clearly cost, his tributary kingdoms all around, Athens included, the most, right, of this terror, this 9-year cycle, Hunger Games, right, basically sending your young in to die and be sacrificed. And the Minotaur didn't just appear. I'll tell a little bit of the backstory here. Minos, who is the king, once had this golden, this beautiful, perfect white bull. And the white bull, I forgot how it was granted to them. He won it in some contest. But basically, one of the conditions was, or maybe he promised it himself. He said, I will sacrifice this beautiful, perfect bull to Poseidon, the god Poseidon. And when the time came, he reneged on the deal. He basically substituted a fine, beautiful, very expensive, very costly, wonderful bull from his flock. But this sort of special, magical, almost magical bull, he was like, I can't bear myself. And, Poseidon is not a god you want to cross. And Minos crossed him, right? This sort of act of hubris. So what Poseidon did was he struck the king's wife, the queen, Pasiphae, with a madness, this uncontrollable lust to mate and have sex with that white bull that Minos kept. Right. Okay, you see the circumambulation here and the sort of forces within. Poseidon is a symbol of a part of you too. Right? The executive function makes a deal with the darker, very powerful functions within you and then reneges. And the deeper, powerful functions within you are like, that's not okay. That's not okay. Is it punishment? As we said right at the beginning of the pandemic, when Poseidon strikes back at Minos, is it punishment or is it transformation? That is the key central question of the pandemic, and is the key central question of every single tragic episode of this story, of all along the golden thread of the story. So Poseidon strikes Pasiphae. For those of you who are seriously nerding out, Pasiphae, I think, is the older sister of Circe from the Odyssey. Okay, so they're both daughters of Helios. So Pasiphae is on Crete with Minos. She's just minding her own business. She gets struck with this madness, and she can't go. The bull won't mate with her because she's not a cow. So she gets Daedalus, the slave, master craftsman, artisan who works for Minos and is exiled. He's trapped there on the island. She gets Daedalus to make a false cow that she then climbs into And when the bull thinks he's mating with the false cow, he's actually mating with Pasiphae. And why does she do this? She's been struck with this madness by Poseidon. It's not her fault. 9 months later or whatever, she gives birth to the Minotaur. This is the deepest shame. I mean, this is the king and queen of Crete who control Athens and all these other kingdoms around them. And this like unspeakable shame has happened, this wound. Right? You can say, well, it started with Minos' hubris, but it's like, you can even argue, is this even like fair punishment? What the hell is going on here? Right? When the punishment is so disproportionate, you have to start asking yourself, is it really punishment, or is it some form of forced transformation?
Right.
And if so, what is the hand behind this? And in the talk just now, I would argue, and this may change your view of the Muse forever, where you fear her more than you love her. But I would argue that the force in our mortal lives of pushing forward the fulfillment of the full pattern is the Muse. Right? So can you say she's the one that put the idea in Minos' head? No, don't give him the bull. You keep that bull. And he like blindly just like, oh, okay. I guess you're right, babe. I guess I am all that. I guess I will keep it. And then sets this whole path in motion. In other words, the entire myth is labyrinth, not just the labyrinth itself. So she gets Daedalus this thing, and then the Minotaur comes out. The Minotaur is your deepest. The Minotaur is a valid part of you. It did come out of this union. He is the stepson of Minos. He is the blood son of Pasiphae. So there's no denying the Minotaur. But he's horrific and shameful, and he's always hungry. So then what Minos, for his part, does is, and this is a very interesting consistency, he also commissions Daedalus for his crafts and artisan skill to build something. Not a cow this time, but the labyrinth itself. Daedalus is the architect of the labyrinth, which puts him in a very special place in the Greek pantheon. He's not even a god, he's immortal. Daedalus, for those of you who know, he's also the one who, built the wax wings with his son Icarus. The reason he built those wings was to escape Crete and escape the tyranny of King Minos. So he's this master craftsman, and he builds the labyrinth, which is all the suppressions and things we do in our lives to basically not think about the thing that is the most shameful and hurtful part of our own inner self. It could be anything. It could be addiction. It could be a trauma you suffered. It could be any of these things. It could be part of you that is just, we talk all about this in healing, right? This is the lost board member. This is the Minotaur is the lost board member. And in this case, it's not, we say lost, but it's really exiled. It's suppressed. It's buried down under 10 floors of Guantanamo prison of this labyrinth, and it's right at the bottom. And then you have to feed it, so you extract things out of blood and treasure from your life. Taking these youths, 7 and 7, from the surrounding kingdoms, that does not contribute to prosperity and peace in the realm, right? When you have a shame and you use, say, alcohol to sort of stuff down the addiction, right? All the blood and treasure that you lose to this addiction, which you need to stuff down the pain, right, is not free. It costs you in career and relationship and everything else. So this is the 7 and 7, right? The emerging inner masculine and inner feminine, the flower of youth is burned to sort of manage this Minotaur. So this is the thing we're dealing with here. And actually, this isn't even off to the side. When you circumambulate in life, when the Muse brings you closer and closer in, she's bringing you closer and closer in to recovering and engaging with this lost board member within you. That's why the lost board member interview is day 3 of the 7-day healing program. It's right in the middle. It's right in the middle. It is the crux, right? It is the crux. And so, another sort of image of the Muse here is Ariadne. Right? She is the inner feminine, literally. And when you come in and you say, okay, I'm finally going to get on this, I'm going to heal, I'm going to like figure this out. And the muse is leading you in, right? The muse basically tells Theseus, go in and do this. Theseus is like, I don't know how I know, I just know it's going to be okay. And even if not, I'm doing this thing, right? And his father's like, what the hell, are you nuts, right? Look at the career you have in front of you. Send somebody else. So he goes in, and the muse is there in the form of Ariadne. And she literally says, here's your sword, here's your power, but also here's your clue. The ball of yarn in Old English is called a clue, C-L-E-W. It's where we get our word for clue, C-L-U-E. So he gets a clue from the muse, ha. And the clue is literally this ball of golden thread leading you through the labyrinth of your life. The same golden thread of the Bill Stafford poem we read in the first 2 sessions. The same this thing like is with us all throughout, these mythopoetic images, and it's so beautiful. So he goes in. Those of you who did the Frog King story, this golden thread is also the golden ball of the whole self that the frog went down and got back for you. Who is the frog in the story? It's the Minotaur. So here you have the frog at the bottom of the labyrinthine well. And the golden ball here, the physics are a little bit different. The golden ball is leading you in, given to you by the princess to go and retrieve the frog. Right? It's flipped here, but all the physics are there. All the actors are there. Now he goes in and he kills the Minotaur. So you're like, well, that doesn't seem like a very nice reconciliation. And you have to remember here that death in a dream or in a myth is symbolic of transformation. So when you kill the Minotaur, you are transforming it, right? And the point of him going in is to say this continued, repeated 9-year cycle. So every sacred cycle of 9 years, because 9 is a sacred number, we give the perfection. 7 is the perfect number. Perfection of the inner masculine, perfection of the inner feminine, emerging inner feminine, because they're youth. So the new shoots of growth and sort of thriving and creativity within us, in every sacred cycle of our life, we take and we basically feed to this monster. It eats it and we get nothing back. We get another 9 years of just silence. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. Let's not talk about it. And he says, we have to break this cycle. We can't go in the same circle. We can go in a different circle, but we have to break the cycle. And it is the muse that is the agent of the breaking of the cycle all along. She leads him into the labyrinth to transform the nature of wound, and she leads him back out. Remind me, Gary, I want to hook this back into following our bliss in the end, which I think I will, but just in case I forget. When he comes back out and they sail back to Athens, he abandons Ariadne on the island of Naxos. And you're like, well, all men are pigs and he's just a jerk and he just used her. And so, yeah, absolutely, that you can read it at that level. But when you're reading it at the mythopoetic level, Ariadne is a part of you. Theseus is a part of you, right? These are inner masculine, inner feminine within you. So what's going on? He is guided by the even higher form of the muse, which is not Ariadne, but Athena herself. Right, who is almost like the master muse over all of this. Because he is the king of Athens, the crown prince of Athens, and Athena is coming to him, telling him what to do. What are you going to say when the uber muse comes in and tells you to do something? You are going to surrender. Right? And Ariadne, depending on the version, is fine, or she hangs herself in some instances where she does die and transform. Here she is wedded to the god Dionysus. They actually have kids. It is a sort of fruitful kind of thing. And, there's this sense of like Ariadne is like this muse of the chthonic, of the underworld. She's the muse who knows how to get in and out of the labyrinth. How does she know that? right? Do you think she just has kept everything clean? She's never been to the labyrinth? Or do you think she's never actually met the Minotaur? Right? She knows the labyrinth because she is a dweller of the labyrinth in her own way. Right? So she is wedded to Dionysus, who is this sort of chthonic underworld-ish kind of deity, who is Bacchus, right? He's the god of sort of wine and inebriation, intoxication, from which truth will comes out, right? Because in vini verum, right, the old Latin saying, in wine there is truth. So loosening the tongues, making things come forth, speaking truth. And so it is this, you can read it as this betrayal, which is valid, and you can also read it as this transformation of the muse to the higher level of Athena. And then when he comes back, you see this theme in the Fisher King, when the Fisher King comes back and the Grail King dies. When Theseus comes back, his father dies. And it is a tragic scene. But it is this kind of thing where at the profane level, they get their signals crossed as a punishment. It's a tragic scene. Oh, well, make sure you remember to hoist the right sail. But at this deeper mythopoetic level, it is something that has to happen because King Aegis is a part of you, Theseus is a part of you, and just as Ariadne transforms into this next form of Muse, which is Athena, Theseus transforms into the king. He's no longer the prince anymore. He has gone through his initiation. He has cleared the wound of the Minotaur for now, for this cycle. And he ascends the throne, and this is how he does it. He's not going to go home and commit, parricide and kill his dad, right? It's like the dad, the older inner masculine naturally falls off like old skin so that the new growth can come. And that's very specific here because Theseus was one of the 7 youths that we were going to go and burn. And he cleared the wound. So that youth comes back and grows fully into the oak tree of being the king of Athens. Right. So symbolically, when you read it, it's okay that these characters die. They're all different parts of your own inner self. And so, so the thing I want to say here is about relating this back to the muse is that, well, we're like, this is kind of a depressing story, Artie and Gary. I'd always thought the muse was like wonderful and blissful and was going to lead me to all this cool stuff in my life. And now you're telling me you're going to lead me down into this like horrible, tragic, epic soap opera of a story. It doesn't make me feel very good at all. And the secret to this whole story, the key, is in the Minotaur itself. And when I teach healing and bliss, I always teach that there is this deep connection between healing and bliss. I mean, the thing I always say, right, is that from your deepest wound, the Minotaur, will come your greatest gift to the world. Right? So your deepest wound, your frog, your lost board member, your deepest shame, is secretly connected, almost like vertically up through the center of the labyrinth, right, to the highest point of your actual ordained bliss. Right? If the wounds are part of the pattern too, of the archetype, that your muse is in charge of helping you manifest over your life, if the wounds are part of the pattern and the bliss is part of the pattern, then the deepest wound must be connected to the highest bliss. Right? Does that make sense? That makes sense, right? Yeah. And so we see that in healing. When we do healing, it's like when you do a bunch of healing, you clear a bunch of wounds and you're like, okay, well, I feel good enough to start looking at my bliss. When you start truffle hunting in the direction of your bliss, you realize the highest bliss you have is like actually deeply connected to your wound. Because your bliss involves, like, I mean, not to get too technical, like the things you naturally have empathy for no good reason. And the things you have the most empathy for are the things related to your own Minotaur. Because you understand, it's like if you are, I mean, it's like a sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's like, I understand because I was there. I was you 3 years ago, right? And I can help you. Any kind of trauma, any kind of sort of mentoring guidance. And so this secret is also buried at the heart of this very old Greek myth as well. And the secret is in the name of the Minotaur. This Minotaur is not some monster that just washed up on shore. This Minotaur was birthed by Pasiphae herself, the queen of Minos. So he is her son. And she did name him. So the Minotaur is the shamey name we give to it. He does actually have a name. And the Minotaur's name is Asterion. Asterion. And the name Asterion means star.
Yeah.
So the lowest level of the prison, where the deepest wound is named for what it actually is, which is the highest thing, the star. Right? So in the Frog King, we sent the frog down to get the golden ball back. What is the golden ball? It is the full reconciliation of your inner self, the inner masculine and inner feminine. And then afterwards we discover, oh, the frog was actually Prince Charming. He's the other half. There is no golden ball without the frog and me marrying him. And here the physics are different. The sort of details are different, but the underlying physics are the same. You get the golden ball from the princess to go down into the well to engage and transform the frog.
Yeah.
And the Minotaur doesn't change into Prince Charming. Right? The Minotaur's name, the Minotaur's true nature is hidden in his name. The Minotaur is the star. A star is the ultimate golden ball. Right? The sun, the star, is a self-luminous golden ball. So you are here. Theseus is also going down to do transformation, do all this work in the cauldron to come back up with the golden ball of Asterion. So in other words, even in a horrifying, scary kind of Greek myth like this, with princesses being betrayed and abandoned, and monsters being slain, and fathers who are totally innocent, didn't do anything, like jumping off a cliff and killing themselves. Even in the heart of all of this messy, bloody, horrific circumambulation, there's a larger pattern at work, set in motion by the Muse, by Athena in this case, by the divine feminine, if you will, to get you down into the deepest so that you can go up to the highest. Right, at that level, it's no different than the Frog King. It's no different. Frog King is just, northern Germany, and this is ancient Greece. So this is kind of where we ended up. And Theseus, the hero here, basically does as he's told. He has this dream. He has this intuition. He goes, even at risk of his own life. Ariadne tells him what to do. He just listens. Athena tells him to abandon Ariadne. He listens. Right? At the critical point, the one thing he doesn't listen to is when Athena didn't tell him to hoist the sail.
Yeah.
That was what he worked out with his dad, and that didn't happen. And it just had to, because he had to ascend the throne. So, and so for me, what is this point of this massive circumambulation across the Mediterranean in this one very relatively small snippet of Greek myth that Gary selected? I don't know, right? I don't know. But you see all the elements of everything we talk about mythopoetically in it. Similarly, then you draw out to like the global pandemic that's still going on in our world right now, in the profane. Right? It's a massive global circumambulation. What is the point of it? Who are the muses that are driving it forward? I have no idea. But we're being led to do these like sacred space sessions. We're just kind of shutting up and listening, going with the flow. Many things have come up, but that's not how you judge it, right? You don't judge following the muse's guidance by saying, well, it's gone okay so far, or we'll see. Right? It's not for us to judge. When you get it and you've authenticated it for yourself, that it is the authentic voice of the muse, as far as as far as you're concerned. The only choice it's just like the labyrinth. You don't get to choose what turns you make. It's a single track in and out. Your only choice is whether to enter, And then once you're in, whether you keep going or not. That's all. And then however it winds around and circumambulates, that's what you just kind of receive, like a dumb animal. Like a dumb animal. What do you think, Artie? Do you have anything to add?
I mean, there's so many patterns that come in, and to me, chiefly, it just feels like when you look at the whole thing is the growth of Theseus from being a crown prince to the king, right? But just the whole process is messy because, you know, being a king is not easy. You've got to go through this entire transformation. But one of the things that struck me, not while I was telling the story, but after that, when you were making these comments, is that when Theseus sets out with the first intuition that he has that, you know, he wants to go himself volunteer to do this, he tells his dad that I don't have a plan, but I must do this and I will do it. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminded me when I was thinking about it of something that you said a few sessions ago about bliss. That bliss is not something that you should do. It's something that you must do and you will do, right? So it is, I mean, what Theseus does at every point, like you pointed out, when Ariadne tells him what to do or when Athena tells him what to do, is just complete surrender. Mm. And you could possibly say, and this is what I wanted to ask you, is that you could possibly say that his first intuition, when he wanted to kind of go and volunteer, is also that he's horrified at this particular 9-year cycle of what happens. It's just endlessly sacrificing people, you know, on, and he wants to put an end to it. So somewhere, is that also a driving force, is empathy and compassion for the people of Athens as it happens? So is that one of the driving forces there?
Absolutely. I mean, he is this youth, right? So when you see children, babies, and dreams, they are typically a symbol of the new growth within you, right? So the young Theseus will be like the new inner masculine coming up, the 2.0 inner masculine, right? His son later, Hippolytus, will be like the new inner masculine of that part of the cycle. And so when you come to something with fresh eyes, you're like, you know, like if you're a person in the middle of just some kind of addiction, right? You're like lost in it for years. And it's sort of like one day people talk about the grace of God, right? Or the Muse coming and just tapping you finally. You wake up and you're like, what the hell have I been doing for the last 9 years? And out of nowhere, spontaneous, you're like, I'm done. I'm done. Mm. You know, you have these stories, they have one more bender with a friend, and then that's it. They're done. And they're done like forever. And, you know, we don't really have the language in our profane world. The best is we're like, you know, a higher power or the grace of God, or it just happened out of moment of clarity. I don't know. We lack the vocabulary for this, which is fine. It still comes in and does its magical thing. But part of the, I don't know, just the lost opportunity of not having the vocabulary is that you can't have a deeper conversation with it. You know, it's like you're traveling and you meet this really attractive person that you would like to get to know more, right? It's like if you can say a few words in the same language, that's great. But if you lack the deeper vocabulary, there's nothing more is really going to happen. And having that deeper vocabulary to be able to have this kind of interaction and engagement back and forth with the Muse. You know, even if you can't negotiate with her, you can whine and complain. Right? I was whining and complaining all day yesterday. I mean, I don't want to make it seem like it was like this. I was like this king. I was understanding and holding space. I was whining and gnashing my teeth all day yesterday. And my Muse is used to it. Right? She was just rolling her eyes, going like, "Okay, tell me when you're done, and I'll give you the next clue."
Yeah. That's the other thing that I wanted to say is that somehow knowing, I mean, you talked about how terrifying it is to follow the Muse's orders, and even though you don't understand what this is about, what it entails, and how much more terrifying it can get, none of that. But to have this understanding that there is a muse that guides us and tells us what to do, and also there is a large pattern that we don't see while we are in it, but maybe in retrospect, maybe we'll be able to see a pattern later on. Somehow kind of gives us this a bit of tolerance for what's going on and the uncertainty that comes with it, because otherwise it's so difficult to come to terms with it. And you're like, why me? Why does this have to happen with me? You know, why do I have to be chosen to go into the labyrinth and get sacrificed to the monster? You know, why do I have to put up with this? There's so many of this, and very common questions and very natural questions that come up. And I feel like knowing that you can, whether you get answers or not, you can actually talk to the muse, and that these things come from her. And it is because you fit into a larger pattern, is somehow easier to kind of reconcile with that and not be tormented by those questions of why me.
I think yes and no. I think not to misuse our vocabulary here, but the old saying, ignorance is bliss, definitely comes into. Because if you're being guided to like leave your, you know, not to pick on the finance people in the audience, but to leave your investment banking job, to go off and be a painter, right? Ignorance is bliss, because if you don't have this framework and mythopoetic lens of the muse, you stay in the profane, and you're like, you know, my wife's going to leave me if I go be a painter. I'm not going to make any money. I'm going to lose my kids. I'm going to lose my house. Obviously, I'm going to stay in banking. Right. You know, even though I have an ulcer and my back is out and I can't sleep at night, obviously I'm going to stay in banking. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'll go to my doctor, get pills to like take pills to like nuke all the voices down there, put the Minotaur to sleep for like 90 years, not 9, right? And no more dreams, no more any of this, and you just keep going.
Yeah.
Once you have this mythopoetic lens of like, okay, there's a deeper pattern, and you even spend 5 minutes looking at the deeper pattern, it's like, oh shit, right? And you know painting is your Minotaur waiting for you at the center of the labyrinth. Yeah. And it doesn't stop there. Once you've actually gone through all the hell you have to go through to even get the brush in your hand back again, then you actually start painting. It's nice for a while. But when you're there in the center with the Minotaur, it's like a trap door opens and you go even deeper down or up into like Asterion, into your bliss. Right, but it's like you realize, oh, this is my path, and then you actually walk it. And if you walk it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it makes a difference because it's a consumable path that progresses even further. So it's almost like when you see that there's a pattern, that's when it becomes even more irresistible. Because when you see everything laid out and you need to fight these scary things of like leaving finance and changing your like, you know, how you get through in the world, right, materially through the profane. It's almost more terrifying because you have no defense against it anymore. Right? How are you not gonna, when you know, there's this funny thing that I talk about sometimes. I'll describe this in the exercise actually, but when you get to know your muse, you know, I often say, you know, ask her little questions that you can test over the next day or two. Right, little things, and she'll know you're testing her, and she'll like, you know, she's like, that's fine. Let's make sure it's really us. I'll show you my driver's license and all that. So you can do these little tests, and she'll humor you, because she wants to get moving too, right? So she'll put up with your mortal whatever stuff, and you authenticate that it's really her. And in this authentication period could be years if you need. That's fine. But the irony is like, once someone, and I see this in myself, once you have authenticated the voice as being valid and authentically hers, and when you hear it, you know it's her. Ironically, then, you consult her less frequently. Why? Because it's frigging terrifying. But this is a voice you can't explain to your spouse or any of your friends. Right? If I explained it to like a psychiatrist, they probably medicate me, right? I mean, thankfully, I'm not I don't think hurting anybody with my bliss. Right? I'm just telling stories, but once you know the voice is authentic, it's this voice or a strong intuition. Okay. Right? The realm of the profane is like having none of this. And you know that every time you go to her, whatever she says, you will resistance or no resistance. Eventually, you will do. You have no control. Oh, and by the way, when you go and talk to her, whatever she says, you have no control over, you will do. And anytime you go to her, you have no idea what she's going to say. You have no idea what she's going to throw down and lay on you.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying. And we go through a phase where it's just like, no, I'm good. I've enough work to keep me busy. I don't need another check-in. And, you know, obviously.
You have this strong urge to kind of rationalize everything that comes out of her mouth. So that's the profane side of you, trying to rationalize, trying to find logic in what she's saying.
You're trying to find patterns you can control her better, or at least predict her. And she's like, no.
Yeah.
I'm driving the bus.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying.
It is. So I just want to, that's the last thing I want to kind of comment on this point. There's an observation about the value of keeping your word. It's come up, when the son fails to keep his word, and to the father and to the woman who assisted him, very significant. And I want to point that those points in the story actually are also significant, that they trigger transformation of some sort. So the vocabulary of the story is couched in terms of not keeping his word, but I think that's actually the trigger where the transformation point happens. Is that a valid way of looking at it?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for pointing that out. So we can read these myths at a profane or a sacred level. I mean, multiple levels, right? But just to keep it simple. So Frog King, right, the princess and the frog, at a profane level, right, mothers all over the world through generations have read the Princess and the Frog story to their daughters, saying, from the profane reading, well, sweetie, that's why we say you got to kiss a lot of frogs to find your Prince Charming, right? And that's valid, but it's the profane lens. So when you see the sacred lens, it's like, no, this is not about dating and finding your man. This is about your own inner Minotaur, right? And what is the action around like recovering him and coming back into reconciliation with it. So that's the sacred. Here, there's also a profane and sacred, and they are connected. And which is that the commitments that you make, right, at this kind of profane level, between Theseus and his father, and also between Theseus and Ariadne, right? The impulse of Ariadne to say, I'll do this, but only if. Right? I'm not faulting her or him. I'm just saying the physics of that kind of a thing is transactional. Right? So anytime it's transactional, it's quid pro quo, it's tit for tat, then it is something that is profane because it's conditional. Right? Ariadne could have said, I'm going to help you because I'm the avatar of the Muse, and you just do what I tell you. And he's like, oh my God, I'm in love with you. It's like, go do your job. Right, go do your job. Now, I'm not saying that shouldn't happen. It's just this part of thing where, and often in my experience with myself and also advisees, right, you will find yourself as you're guided by the Muse in this kind of between a rock and a hard place kind of situation, where there is a profane commitment you've made, right? Not profane as in invalid. It's like, it is like, for instance, a job that you promised you would be in for another 2 years. And now it's like painting is calling, and you need to give 2 weeks notice, and you're going to break all this glass. You're going to hurt people, are going to miss, their revenue targets. They're going to lose their jobs because of you following your, like, whatever this is, this Muse thing. What's gotten into you? What's wrong with you? Keep it together, right? Get a grip, back together. Don't do this, do this. Leave the sacred, come back into the profane. Pull yourself together. And you say no. And you break it because you have to break it to continue going on. Right? You have to break it to continue going on. And that happens all the time. All the time. And at a profane level, you are the villain. You are in the wrong. Right? It's not like you can be in the profane, break all these commitments and say, oh, but I'm following a higher order. No. No, you want to follow the muse, you follow the muse, but in the profane, you have to pay everything in full. Right? There is no like deal where they're like, oh, but he's following his higher calling, it's okay, let him go. No one's going to say that. They're going to like throw rocks at you, they're going to flay you, they're going to whip you, and you pay that. You pay that willingly because it is good to be close to the muse. That's the only way I can say it. Right? Following the muse, I can't guarantee you anything. I can't guarantee you a Nobel Prize. I can't guarantee you food on the table. I can guarantee you absolutely nothing. She makes no guarantees. You either surrender or you don't. You get in the labyrinth or you don't. There's no map. I can't promise you what's going to happen. And you just take it or you don't. And you don't have to take it. This is a sacred space. I'm not saying you have to go follow your muse. You don't have to follow your muse. I'm just describing some of the physics of it as we've observed it in this work.
Yeah. And the loss of prestige is a very, very valid risk. As we've seen with many artists and geniuses in the past, probably we've studied their lives. While they go on their wild chase following their muse, the loss of prestige and bad reputation, so to speak, has been a very valid risk and compromise they've made.
Tons of stories on that. Tons of stories.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Thanks, Artie.
All right. Can we keep going?
Comments from me.
Okay.
And you said kind of carry on with an exercise or something. So I'll kind of let you do that. I'll step back now.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so the last thing I want to do before I close Sacred Space is I haven't given an exercise in a while. So I'll just give a little exercise for you to kind of think about and muse about between now and the next session. And it's very simple. It's just the exercise for this week is just to ask the muse for guidance. All right. So now if you buy some of the stuff I've been saying, you may now have a sense that, the muse is there in your life, whether you see her or not, whether you accept her or not. And she's behind the scenes moving things, right? And the exercise is basically to say, hey, I know you can hear me. I can't hear you. I can't see you. I have a sense that you're there from Artie and Gowrie. I don't know if you can hear me, but I just want to say hello. Hello. And I'm wondering if there's anything you would like to tell me, right? Any signals or signs you'd like to give me, little warnings here and there, a little guidance. I'm just saying hello and I'm open to you. I surrender to you. If there's nothing you want to say, that's fine. If there's a lot of things you want to say, I'm getting this picture now and I would like to be closer to you. I would like to be closer to you. Okay. I would do that only if you want, and then just see what comes. It may come in dream, it may come in intuition, it may come in through a body feeling. It may come in like episodes that happen in real life, in daydreams. Right? The mythopoetic expands all these realms, so it may take some time and practice for you to like get your mythopoetic eyes. It's like when you're in the forest here in Northern California, right? When you're mushroom hunting in the forest, you don't see the mushrooms, and then after a while, you've been doing it for a while, you like get your morel eyes and you start to see morels as distinguished from like the fallen leaves, right? And then you see them everywhere. It's like a switch flips and you see the muse everywhere after. So that's the thing, to start to sort of develop your muse eyes and your muse ears to see if you can see her pattern and fingerprints in the world around you. And then just to say, hello, welcome her in if you are feeling welcoming. And then, you can't control her, but it doesn't hurt to ask. It's like anything I can do, anything you need from me. What's the plan? She may be like, I'm not telling you, but it doesn't hurt to ask. It doesn't hurt to ask, right? Okay, so that's the exercise for this week. All right, then. So now I will close the session. I know next session is next Sunday. It's free of charge. It's open to everyone. Please invite other. Ask any questions you would like to ask in any of the question sort of post feature pages, and we'll collect them. And every few sessions, we'll do a Q&A session. You have the green button in your panel. You can go there now and sign up for the next session Sunday. And I look forward to seeing you all there. So I hereby close this session of our shared sacred space. Thank you for holding this space with me. And thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment of this shared sacred space with me and with Gauri. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great day, have a great week, and I will see you in the next session. Thank you. Thank you.